We still do 7 NUFC Matters shows for free a week. But if you want to support the channel, there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast or video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications options. Hit the thanks button to buy a super sticker. You can do this on the live chat too. You can also join our Patreon page or buy us a coffee at the link in all of our video descriptions below. We are also looking for sponsors. If you want our latest advertising rates and how you can get involved, then email John at nufcmatters1892@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you,
good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters. It is the transfer show with Ben Jacobs. Good evening, Ben, or good afternoon, should I say, in New York.
New York. This is far from Leicester, as my real, not AI background shows. Good to be back, mate. How are you?
Very good, mate. Very good. Good to have you on. As always, plenty going on in the transfer window. So great to have you on and get your insight, your views, and your opinions. As I always say on here, please don't take everything as gospel. This is a chat between two people who enjoy the football and who have always got that ear to the ground. We always get things wrong and we can always get things right, but it is just our opinion. So for any of those people who like to go off and take what Ben says or what I say and go and stick it on the internet as fact, it's not always fact. There is quite a lot going on though, Ben, so let's get straight into it. A lot of questions. I'm going to avoid some of the questions I got sent on Twitter, X as it's known now, of course. Listen, keep it clean. Ben's a great guy. He's a good lad. And I always like to get him on for a chat. And I know a lot of the viewers enjoy it there. 2,500 already tuned in on Twitter and YouTube. So I think that says a lot about how Ben is, placed, I guess, in the transfer chat position. So Ben, where do we start? I guess we start with the whole Ekitik thing. And there's a lot of questions coming. I'll try to pick them out just so that we can go for them. Christopher says, question for Ben or anyone. Is it not odd that Ekitik hasn't been capped by France yet? France have got a lot of talent, but I noticed Shirky at 21 is in there and cost half the price of Ekitik. Then there's this one. Ben, do you think we were used by Ekitik's agent to draw in Liverpool? Other people have asked, do you think Newcastle have played a blinder here by pretending to want Ekitik just so that Liverpool would then pounce on Ekitik and ignore our main striker who's got a better track record, Alexander Isak? Ian just says, I'm glad the whole Ekitik thing's over for another few years till we try again. The mainstream media have shown complete disrespect to us as fans and our club. Was that the last one? Probably just, but yeah, let's go with that. Then the Ekitik thing, it's been interesting, Ben. It's not over yet, of course. Liverpool have got to do a deal. If they do want him, they've got to do a deal with probably one of the hardest bargaining clubs in European football. It's not over yet. But what's your whole feeling on what we've seen develop over the last few days?
Yeah, let's just start with Ian's last point, though, around mainstream media and disrespect for Newcastle. I understand that every single fan base will always see links with the player moving away and feel it's either disruptive or if the player stays, that there wasn't much in it. And when I broke the story that Liverpool hadn't given up on Alexander Isak, and this was all the way back at the beginning of the window, it was definitely attacked. But guess what? Liverpool hadn't given up on Alexander Isak because they tried. So it is one thing protecting your club. And this is why I like coming on these fan podcasts, because you get the opportunity to engage and hear everyone's opinion and ultimately defend your reporting. But there's been 6 weeks of the Liverpool will still try for Isak, are prepared to place a world record bid. And in that 6 weeks, it was very much dismissed as no chance, not going to happen. They won't try, but they did. And that was pretty much all I reported, along with stressing that Newcastle didn't want to lose Alexander Isak. Then if you look at Hugo Ekitike, I don't think Newcastle's pursuit was framed around inflating the market. They sent a delegation to Germany. They tried to be quick. They definitely wanted to agree a fee there. They had a bid for about 80 million euros rejected. And then they quickly moved on when it was apparent that Ekitike wants the Liverpool move. And now Liverpool are, of course, advancing. And equally, Liverpool's interest in both Isak and Ekitike is genuine. So the Liverpool push for Ekitike actually predates Newcastle's. And when they did their sort of data scoring of strikers, Liverpool had João Pedro, who's now at Chelsea, Hugo Ekitike, Benjamin Sesko, and of course Alexander Isak, very high in their thinking. So I think this whole Liverpool trying for Isak and then moving on to Ekitike is normal at this time in the market for a few reasons. The first is the player wants to be settled. The second is we're into the new financial year. The third aspect in all of it is just if you see another club move for a player that you might want, you have to get your skates on both. If Liverpool had just sat back on Ekitike, maybe Newcastle would have got it over the line, or maybe the player would have felt, wait a minute, I'm the backup. And I know now it might be billed as that because Isak's the dream target and it doesn't look like it's going to come off. But Liverpool are very honest and they develop relationships with players early. So when they finally go to the clubs, they've usually got buy-in or encouragement. And that's kind of how this happens. So I think Newcastle almost sped up the pursuits of Liverpool of both Ekitike and Isak, because Liverpool felt like we need an answer on Isak, not what people think in public, not what Darren Eales said in public, not the perspective of Yasser Al-Rumayyan. We need an actual club-to-club perspective before deciding if we're going to put big money on Isak or big money on Ekitike. And now we know that Liverpool have gone down the Ekitike route, and I think that deal will probably get done and sooner rather than later. And it's probably a weird one because there might be some people in the chat, maybe yourself included, Steve, that feel like you can almost celebrate the fact that Liverpool are going to get Ekitike because it likely means that Isak is staying. And similarly, had Ekitike arrived, you could make an argument that either Liverpool would have been more encouraged, or even if Isak had stayed for a season, there was an element of succession planning in that search for Ekitike. And there still might be, by the way. So again, I'm reporting what I hear and I know, and I feel like it's sourced not just from interested clubs, but from within Newcastle as well. And at some point, this Callum Wilson exit, young striker profile is going to happen. And I think they don't just want to go young, inexperienced, give that player 4, 5, 6 years. I think they want young and ready. And this is where, for example, Benjamin Sesko is another very interesting profile. João Pedro falls into that category. And I don't sense that's because they feel like this young but ready profile is going to be around with Isak for several years to come. There's definitely a part of Newcastle that are saying one day Isak's going to go for big money. Maybe it's not today, tomorrow. Maybe it's not even in a year. But one day, Alexander Isak is likely to be sold, and very possibly for a British transfer record. So they want to make sure that they've got that succession planning in place. And I think there was an element of the Ekitike pursuit framed around the fact that one day, whenever that may be, if Isak is sold, they've got this young but box office player that isn't still inexperienced, that does have a proven track record. And that's how this kind of crazy saga all came about. And I understand that fans of each club will basically have a very fan-centric perspective on this. Liverpool fans excited about Isak, but they're happy enough with Ekitike. Newcastle fans feeling like Isak was never for sale. That's probably the most replied comment in any reporting. And ultimately, it may prove correct this summer. But again, the line I had, broken exclusively weeks ago, was Liverpool had not given up and would try. They tried, and now they've moved on seemingly to Hugo Ekitike. And from Newcastle's point of view, regardless of the Isak situation, I expect them to go back into the market in order to find that young but established profile with a view to both part succession planning for Isak without saying it's going to happen immediately, and part obviously needing to fill the void left by the departure of Callum Wilson.
Yeah, okay, let's move on. Whissa is the latest name to be linked with Newcastle. Obviously, João Pedro was the first, circus in town. Now we've got the Ekitik saga, which by all accounts at the moment seems as if it's behind us. We'll wait and see. And now we're on to Whissa. Let's not forget Mbeumo as well. He still hasn't moved to Manchester United. Manchester United really dragging their feet over that whole situation. Certainly must be struggling to maybe come up with a deal out of finances. Who knows? But yeah, Whissa is the latest linked with Newcastle. What's your feelings on Whissa? We know that they won't sell both, will they?
We don't think they'll sell both, but obviously money can talk because both of the players have got contracts running down. But my understanding has always been they don't want to lose both in the same window, which might be bad news for Newcastle, Forest, and also Tottenham, who all like Johan Whissa. And obviously you've got Thomas Frank connection with Whissa if Spurs escalate that interest. But Manchester United this morning placed a third offer of £65 million plus £5 million in add-ons for Bryan Mbeumo. They're waiting to hear an answer from Brentford, but there's confidence. And my expectation is that this is either going to be an accepted bid or somewhere close that gets the parties into the final stages of the deal, and very quickly. And I think before we get clarity on the future of Johan Whissa, it is very possible that the agreement in principle for Bryan Mbeumo is done. And Manchester United, now having placed the third bid, are looking to get this one over the line between now and Tuesday when they head to America for their preseason tour. And of course, what it means is that you have another intertwined situation where suitors may try and escalate Whissa fast, and Brentford may wait for Whissa bids too, even if they're going to accept the Mbeumo deal, because they can play those two off each other. And if they are to somehow sell both, they can get the highest possible price, or they can shut the door. So Whissa's high in Newcastle's thinking. They're a bit behind in terms of their development on this deal, because naturally they've been looking at other targets, and that's where Spurs and possibly Nottingham Forest could have a little bit of an advantage. But the main thing with Whissa to understand is there's 1 year left on the contract, but there's a club option to extend by a year. And that provides an opportunity for Brentford to stick to this valuation for Whissa of in excess of 50 million. And now Newcastle have shown their hand that they're prepared to pay club record money, and that they're prepared to do a deal like Ekitik at the tune of £70 million. It's obvious to the market that with Champions League football and a much healthier PSR position compared to 12 months ago, that Newcastle have got money to spend. So it can be quite hard in these scenarios to really get deals done at value. And I still think if Whissa goes, especially in light of Mbeumo advancing to Manchester United, it's going to be a £50 million or more deal. And we wait and see whether Newcastle make a formal approach. That's the expectation in light of cooling their interest or walking away or failing, whatever way you want to call it, for Hugo Ekitik. So let's see if that develops. But again, keep an eye on Mbeumo to Manchester United, because if that is done first, it certainly complicates the Whissa situation.
8,000 watching live. As I said, Ben does bring numbers. A perfect opportunity to pay our respects to somebody who has passed away today. Wyn Davies, Newcastle United legend, a number 9 legend, passed away, and the BBC were first to report it. Also played competitively for Wales, and such a lovely bloke. Had many an opportunity of meeting him. I often have done lots of talk-ins, and him and Pop Robson had a wonderful partnership at the time, and obviously helped Newcastle United win the Fairs Cup. So our thoughts with Wyn's family. I know he was suffering quite a bit from dementia in his later years. So very sad day to report on that as well. And also just to spare a thought as well, it's well over 10 years now. I think we're coming up to 11 years or 12 years since we lost John Alder and young Mr. Sweeney in that horrendous crash. Obviously, whenever pre-season friendlies come up in the summer, it's always a time to remember those two guys. And they're never far from our thoughts. There we are. There's Willa Sula and Joe Willock last season holding up the flag with John Alder and Liam Sweeney's names on. So, yes, our thoughts go with their families as well, because it's always such a hard time. Okay, let's get back to the football. And, any news on Trafford, says Tuna?
By the way, just before that, my thoughts also to the family of Wyn Davies, Wyn the Leap, as I remember him being called from my dad. And actually, I knew him more through Wrexham. And when Wrexham's sort of project blew up, I was able to approach Wyn Davies and speak to him a little bit about the club and its culture. And I always remember as a kid hearing this Wyn the Leap before my time, but running around in the playground at school, I would play some sort of 5 and 7-a-side football. And then at my secondary school, there was like a parents versus kids game. And this like high looping ball came up in the air and I jumped too early and basically missed the ball. And then it bounced again and hit me full on in the face and nearly broke my nose. And one of the parents pulled me aside, a Welsh guy. And apparently I was a little bit young to remember the story, but it's been retold to me when you got to be more like Wyn the Leap. And I never really understood what that meant at the time. And then, of course, I looked it up. So Wyn the Leap has always been a phrase that I remember because of my rubbishness at leaping and trying to head the ball. But yeah, may he rest in peace and best wishes to his family and his friends. So with the Trafford situation, I think it's not moved, but part of that is because Burnley have got promoted and they've been able to ask for a higher number. And Newcastle, I don't think were really in a position to just get this one done a year ago because of their PSR position. And then Trafford decided to do one more season. At Burnley, back then they could have done it for 25. Now you're probably looking at 35 to 40. So Newcastle have been quite disciplined in talks so far. Still the number one target in the goalkeeper position. Still we can refer to talks as advanced, and still perhaps a bit of a surprise if this one doesn't get over the line between now and when the window closes. And from Eddie Howe's perspective, he'll feel delighted to bring in a goalkeeper like Trafford. We know that there's huge appreciation for both Dubravka and Nick Pope, but the difference is perhaps that you get Trafford, you got one for the future, plus 2 goalkeepers as well for now, all of which can compete. And then you're in a position where they look really, really strong, starting by building from the back. And then if you kind of think about the desire to build this project, the next kind of step is obviously going to be, can they compete with big 6 sides or European teams and get their really top targets? And it is almost a compliment to Newcastle United when you miss out on a João Pedro or a Hugo Ekitike, etc., because what it shows is that they're elevating the type of profile they're looking for to such a level that they're competing with other Champions League sides. And as all big sides find, sometimes you win more than you actually get because they've always got another option at another big club. Whereas maybe when you're building a project with such ambition, you're actually able to take players from lower down the pyramid with respect to those leagues or clubs. But now they're in the race for what all the big clubs want. So it's normal, I think, to have a higher volume of rejections. And that for me applies to a lot of clubs, but it kind of shows Newcastle's ambition. And then from there, coming back to Trafford, what they'll be looking to do is after they get maybe that marquee signing or two, find a way if they can to add depth, to add 2, if not 3 in each position, and find a way to blood young players through. And in the bigger picture of this model, we have to understand whether or not that's going to be through multi-club or just their relationships with other clubs. Because one of the reasons why Chelsea can sign so many and keep adding, and one of the reasons why Manchester City can do it as well, is because they've got that network. So then if they've got 2 in each position and you bring in a young goalkeeper or striker, you can say you're definitely going here, or this is the plan for you. And there's a really clear pathway. Mike Penders, if we're talking about goalkeepers at Chelsea, is about to be loaned to Strasbourg. Why? Because it's part of the multi-club group. So this is the benefit of multi-club. And in the long run, I think Newcastle are going to have to probably restructure down that line to give themselves the best possible chance of competing with some of the elite clubs in England and beyond. But in the short term, I think they're showing now they've got a bit of financial flex, and they're obviously looking for starters or box office players just to give a little bit more quality and depth. And then from there, it wouldn't surprise me if the next stage, and we might see some of it during this window, is to find that younger, more up and coming profile. But they've obviously got to guarantee the pathways. So it'd be interesting to see if Trafford comes in, what happens, and if he becomes an immediate number 1 or if there's a year or 2 transition. But certainly if he arrives and there is still confidence, then Eddie Howe is not going to be short of options between the sticks.
Okay, and 9,000 of you watching on Twitter. If you are watching NUFC Matters for the first time, please search NUFC Matters on YouTube and hit the subscribe button. We do 7 shows a week. Okay, we've only got Ben till about 20 to 7, so we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. Jacob says, hi Ben, even though you're in the Big Apple, you can still be the core for a little time on NUFC Matters. A few reports here, Lewis Miley's linked away. Do you know if this is true, or do you think he's going to stay at Newcastle?
Who was that? Sorry, it dropped out.
Lewis Miley.
Well, I think they might be open to something, although we sort of were led to believe maybe 6 months ago that they might even offer him new terms. So perhaps it's an all or nothing situation. I think we're going to see this with Arsenal and both Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard, where you engage in talks with the player, but at the same time, if the right offer comes, you might consider it with nothing really in between. There's certainly a bit of interest in Lewis Miley. Stuttgart was one, Monaco was another, and I even heard that Leeds United quite like the player as well. But I'm not aware of Newcastle really looking to sell unless they get ridiculous money. I think most of the internal discussions at the moment have been how can they reward Lewis Miley and maybe get him to sign on new and improved terms. He's only 19 years of age. It could well be a breakthrough season for him. I think last season he played in 14 Premier League games, and previous season I think it was 17. So when you consider his age and his potential and his height and his power, even though Newcastle have got a really competitive midfield, they value Miley. And of course, he can play as an attacking midfielder or a defensive midfielder. So it would take crazy money. There's genuine interest. But I think Newcastle's preference is to get Miley to sign a new deal. However, as I said a moment ago, I don't think there's any middle ground here. It might be new deal or for amazing money, the opposite extreme. Whether or not they just kind of let it play out without incentivizing and rewarding the player, I'd be surprised personally, but that's the part that remains to be seen.
Okay, Tom Dixon says, Ben, is there any updates on Giorgio Scalvini? I guess as well, you know, we've got to ask you about Mark Gahey. I mean, Mark Gahey's, of course, still at Crystal Palace. Is that still something that Newcastle could look at? We're still looking for centre-half?
Yeah, we know they're looking for a centre-half, that's for sure, and the price for Mark Gahey has dropped, but I'm not expecting Newcastle to re-enter the race unless the price drops significantly, i.e. below 45 million and maybe even closer to 35 or 40 million. Crystal Palace's perspective is they want 45 or 50 million and as a fixed fee, so with add-ons on top. And I don't expect Newcastle to enter the race unless that number drops significantly. It's the same for Liverpool as well, who like Jorel Hatto and slightly younger profiles, even though Gahey isn't old. But Newcastle are not expected to move on the Gahey front despite appreciation unless the price drops. It could be one to watch, though, nonetheless, simply because as the window goes along, Palace will start to fear that they might end up losing him on a free transfer. And that's the sort of interesting thing about the Gahey situation for Liverpool, for Newcastle, potentially for others. We know Chelsea have looked and are also holding talks with Jorel Hatto as well. Palace would rather sell now because crucially they know that Gahey's not going to sign a new deal. Whereas alternatively, Gahey's quite prepared to just run his contract down and then get a move on a free transfer because he knows it's an absolute lock guarantee of minutes in a World Cup year. Whereas a lot of the other clubs, if everybody's fit, might not be able to give Gahey the same kind of minutes as he's currently getting at Crystal Palace. So there's a bit of a different perspective between what the player is prepared to do, i.e. just stay at Crystal Palace, and then what Crystal Palace want, which is probably to bring in some money. And then no real update yet on Giorgio Scalvini, other than to say that he's been a relatively long-term Newcastle United target and fits well into this system in their eyes. And we know that it's quite urgent to find defensive reinforcement, partly because Sven Botman has had reasonably long-term injuries, and also because some of the other defenders that are very popular and very effective and will still be next season too are just a bit older. So adding a slightly younger kind of player is important. Newcastle have only held exploratory talks as far as I'm aware, and Atlanta value the player at 50 million or even more. So he might be more expensive than Mark Gahey. And then you have to consider whether or not you want to go for someone less Premier League proven or just get a player you know could drop straight in. So it's going to kind of be one to watch because the Newcastle interest is absolutely legitimate, but I'm not aware, for example, that they're at the bid placing stage. So we'll have to wait and see in the coming weeks whether that one advances. But for both of them, I think it will be down to price. I think 50+ million for Scalvini is quite a large tag, despite the fact he's a top talent. And for Guéhi, the price has always been fine in terms of what he's worth. If you sign him on a 5-year deal, Mark Guéhi is immediately a 50, if not 60 million pound player. But it's the fact that they want value in the market. And given the contract is ticking down, I don't see anybody paying in excess of 50 million for Mark Guéhi. And Palace, like I say, might chop off some of their initial asking price because they really don't want to lose him on a free.
Good question is from Blue Rhythm Boy. Why is Newcastle's transfer business so public, Ben?
Well, I think all clubs' business to an extent is public. We wouldn't be doing our jobs if it ended up being private. I understand that fans always feel that the links are out there. Sometimes the links helps clubs because they have a lot of noise over one target whilst they go and do another. I know Newcastle, with all the Isak headlines, perhaps don't relish or enjoy concrete approaches. But when it's kind of just noise, and before Liverpool have made the approach, they probably quite like that because it's eating up conversations and back pages whilst they're trying to quietly go and do their business. So it can be beneficial sometimes to have, like Real and Barca always do, a lot of deflection. You see it in Turkey too, a lot of smoke, a lot of noise, and you just ignore it all and go and do your business. Then sometimes the journalists are just good. Newcastle have got a really great pack and quite a large one. They're making calls. They're finding out information. Sometimes deals can get out there because the selling club provide information and they want it out there. Some player agencies are maybe easier to contact and approach and build relationships with. But we're the worst possible people to ask that question to, simply because we want the information out there. We want it to be accurate and we want it to be the first to it. So the notion that good is quiet or quiet should be the norm is bad for Ben Jacobs because it would put me out of a job.
You come on to YouTube podcasts, Ben. You do quite a few. You do a lot of stuff like that. You don't have your own, like a lot of people have their own YouTube channel. I asked a question earlier in the week. Should journalists who are covering a certain club have YouTube channels? I mean, we have you've already mentioned, we've got quite a good pack in the Northeast, but a lot of them now have got their own YouTube channels. And I find that sometimes a little bit concerning. I certainly have with this whole situation that's developed with Isak, because, you know, and with Ekitik, because obviously, you know, most of these reporters are fans themselves. So the emotional side can also get in the way. And I sometimes think that probably creates a bit of a problem as well, because people look to these people sometimes in a responsible position. Now suddenly they've got a YouTube channel. Now YouTube channels work because, you know, some people use them as clickbait. I certainly don't, but some people do. What's your feelings on that? And I'm not asking you to pick out names and stuff. I'm talking about in general, up and down the country. Is it right for journalists to be to have their cake and eat it, if you like? They're getting paid by a newspaper outlet and they've got an individual YouTube channel.
Yeah, I don't have a YouTube channel. I don't know how anyone finds the time to have a YouTube channel either. It's busy enough just trying to report for the likes of Gimme Sport and Talk Sport, and then obviously reiterate that on social media. My perspective is come on fan podcasts to engage directly with fan audiences that have very specific opinions and know their teams well. And that's very helpful in my reporting because you start to understand what yourself and people in the chat think about their club. And it obviously also gives people the opportunity to ask any questions. And I think, as we showed during the takeover saga, never shirked away from coming on here or answering the more difficult questions or defending my position. Regarding YouTube, I don't know that much about it. I've not exactly got a face for YouTube, so I don't think I'd do very well in terms of money if I went down the YouTube route. But the thing to understand is that a journalist, bit less perhaps an influencer or somebody that is more like a content creator, but a journalist, whether they're a fan of the club, whether they've got a YouTube channel, should be having the same editorial standards and process and trying to stay balanced and trying to give a fair and accurate reflection of any story that they cover. And I find, as a Leicester fan anyway, that I'm probably inadvertently not more biased, but more critical about my own club, because you are conscious that if people know you're a fan, they may be going, oh, you're going to be leaning towards whatever that club message is or whatever that club source tells you. And actually, it's kind of the opposite. So just because you've got a YouTube channel, I don't think it makes a massive amount of difference. Some outlets like the idea that their journalists are everywhere and have good exposure because it's an opportunity to promote the work and build the profile. And we're definitely getting to a point where some of the top journalists like David Ornstein, Fabrizio Romano, they've got millions of followers, so potentially as many, if not more, than some of the outlets that they work for. And I think it's normal that they would adapt to the digital times and they would try and have their own platforms. But what you see from the ones I think that I enjoy watching is there's a consistency in what they say and how they're reporting. It's not a case of Ben Jacobs starts a YouTube channel and suddenly he's wearing a Leicester shirt and he's going, Ruud van Nistelrooy should be sacked. And then Ben Jacobs goes on TalkSport and goes, Leicester haven't decided yet on Ruud van Nistelrooy, but they might after July the 1st. You've got to be consistent if you're going to do it. And ultimately, you have to think more about the story. Because my perspective of a journalist is we're not supposed to be the story. We're the ones telling the stories of the stars. So personally, I don't go on to anything thinking, make myself the story, make myself why people watch and listen. Because if I have no information, my assumption is people will go elsewhere and not be interested. And if I have a great story to tell and no information, I don't think most people watching would really give a damn. But if you like someone or don't like somebody, regardless of what extreme you fall, if you have a story and over time you become trusted that your information is accurate and insightful, then that reflects consistently across whatever you do, whether it's mainstream media as a journalist, whether it's your own channels. And then I don't think it's an issue how you choose to present that information, as long as you stick to trying to be balanced and thorough and impartial and accountable. Then from there, whether you put it on this podcast or on a radio or TV station, I don't think it makes the blindest bit of difference personally.
Okay, I've got 5 minutes left with Ben. He's got to get off and do.
I'll give you 10 actually. I'll give you a bonus. I said 45. I'll give you a bonus 5 minutes of extra time.
Good stuff. With Longstaff on his way out, is there any news on a potential replacement?
I think they are happy, like I said before, with Lewis Miley, because they know that he can play as a attacking midfielder or a defensive midfielder. And remember the other key point, that it's a 4-3-3 formation that is favoured by Eddie Howe. So you don't necessarily need 4 midfielders. There's always the ability to play Joe Linton further forwards or in midfield. Sandro Tonali came back from his ban, very strong as well. And I think that's partially why Newcastle sanctioned the Longstaff exit. So I'm not aware that Longstaff going requires necessarily an imminent replacement. It's possibility they strengthen in midfield. And as I said before, it might even be linked to the Lewis Miley situation. But I don't think they're desperate to replace Longstaff like for like. Although the only caveat I would say to that is, remember, as I reported 12 months ago, they really didn't also want to lose Elliot Anderson either. That was more a PSR sale to Nottingham Forest. So I suppose if you add up Anderson and Longstaff, we can't rule out another midfielder, but it's not the top priority right now. They want to bring in a goalkeeper, they want to bring in a centre-back, and they still want a number 9.
Okay, somebody, Andrew, I think put this in last week, or the last time you were on a couple of weeks ago. He says, Ben, this is a quote from yourself. Newcastle proved when they qualified for the Champions League and got knocked out that it is a streaky project. What did you mean by that? Can you remember saying that? And what did you mean?
It's funny because things just get taken like that and then they appear on social media and then it's Ben Jacobs says Newcastle is streaky. But it's not quite what I said. It was a wider conversation about how financially, if you don't get Champions League season on season on season, you can't budget for that. And it impacts your project compared to the sides that do. So right now, Manchester United will not be budgeting for Champions League, nor will Spurs, even though they've got it. Speaking about the next season ahead, you're always really conservative in how you budget until maybe you get 4, 5, 6 consecutive years of the same thing. And then you start to say, we rely on it, we forecast for it, we budget for it, and we spend accordingly. So every football club's aim is up here and every football club's financial projection is down here, because you have to be very conservative. And what I said was that Newcastle compared to the big six teams that have regularly made Champions League football. So at the moment, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, and maybe historically Chelsea. Newcastle compared to them have a streaky project, which is a good and a bad thing. The good part is it's moved really quick. And if you go all the way back to Yasser Al-Rumayyan speaking in the early stages of the project, he was talking about 5 years to get Champions League football. They got it much quicker. But then in the next season, after Man United won the FA Cup, they had no European football. Then this season, they've got Champions League. So now we have to understand what happens next season. And does it become 3 out of 4 years Champions League? Or does it go from Champions League to no Europe, back to Champions League to no Europe? And if you're looking at the football side, you're saying it's just an upward curve. But if you're looking at the financial side, you have to take everything under this ownership from being in the relegation zone when they took over all the way through to now and say, you can't rely season on season on season on Champions League football because it simply hasn't happened. Those are the facts. Maybe it will change. So if you're pitching to players and they're asking for X, Y, and Z on Champions League terms, or if you're pitching to management about infrastructural changes, or if you're trying to get this project level with the big six, you need that consistency. And every time you miss out, even in a given season, because the project is so new, you go back to thinking, well, okay, now we're 5 years in and only 2 years we've had Champions League football. Now we're 10 years in and maybe we've got 5 out of 10. But until it goes back to back to back, the project in financial terms of what they project will always be deemed to be a bit streaky because they can't overextend and commit to Champions League money, changing their wage structure, crazy spend like other big six teams, knowing that it could all be pulled away. And I think that was shown in a microcosm when, on the one hand, they destroyed PSG at home in that Champions League season. And an incredible night. And I was there at St. James's Park. But then they were out before the knockout stage of the tournament, which had a big impact on their finances. So imagine if in that season they budgeted for quarterfinals of the Champions League, they would have been sorely disappointed both financially and in football terms. So that's the element of this project being new, formative, and yeah, a little bit streaky in terms of going from Champions League to no European football, back to Champions League. Streaky is not an insult. It just means they've not had that back to back to back. And my sense is that the true financial flex on and off the field of PIF will only really become apparent when they have minimum back-to-back seasons of Champions League football, which is why this campaign is really important.
Okay, I just want to say happy anniversary to David Cook and his good lady. Hope you have had a good day, David. I can see you in the chat. We've got a couple of questions in about things other than transfers, which, you know, it could be a long drawn-out answer.
I'll be brief.
Yeah, okay. King Monkey says, question with Ben, if in APT we cannot inflate sponsorship deals, why can Chelsea inflate asset values?
Yeah, I mean, associated party transactions are still jury's out, right? So we don't know what the rules are going to look like. And therefore, we can't really talk about an inflation there. But there is a difference between the two practices. Associated party transactions, the worry is you do business with a linked entity and it's not at fair market value. And this is why the Premier League have to look. With Chelsea, they're selling an asset directly from Chelsea Holding to their parent company, which means it's not a third party, it's a direct transaction. And still, by the way, the Premier League assess that for fair market valuation. So there is a synergy in the approach, actually, of an APT case and a self-sale, if you like. But despite the notion Chelsea have inflated things, the Infinite Athlete front of shirt sponsorship was cleared and only the broker fee changed. And the sale of the women's team does appear very high, of course. But prior to that, they were in talks with Alexis Ohanahan, the co-founder of Reddit, and he bought a stake in Chelsea for a valuation of over £200 million. And this is the challenge when you sell anything. as opposed to a third-party transaction where you may have some kind of say and scope. If Chelsea find an investor that's not linked to them and they have that valuation of the club, whether you think it's inflated or not, then they're obviously going to use that valuation if they wish to sell it to themselves. So although the story appeared like Chelsea sell their women's team to themselves for 200 million, and then a week or two later, there's a new investor from outside unlinked to Chelsea, and he buys 10% at a valuation of over 200 million. But of course, that transaction doesn't just happen overnight. So they knew that investment was coming. They knew what the valuation was. They used it as a yardstick, and then they sold the rest of the football club to themselves. And that has allowed them to, yes, find a loophole. But the key difference is that they've got someone that isn't related to Chelsea, that's not got any interest in doing Chelsea any favours. They've got a businessman that says, I'm prepared to buy it based on this club valuation. And it's the same, in fact, slightly higher than Chelsea's own valuation. So then it's very difficult for the Premier League or UEFA to say there's something fishy here, because, you know, if I tell you tomorrow Newcastle's worth $1 billion and you go, that's too much, but then I say, I want to buy 10% of Newcastle for $1 billion and you sell it to me, then the reality in practice is Newcastle is worth $1 billion. And that's kind of the position Chelsea are in. It's kind of the position Villa are in valuing their women's team at 55 million and also finding an investor that isn't third party linked. But the short answer to the question is that APT and these self sales both still do go to the Premier League and UEFA to check the fair market valuation.
Quick questions on players. Ben, Sky Sports linked us to two centre-backs, Savona from Juve, Tarrega from Valencia. Have you heard anything about these two players?
Nothing much to add on Tarrega, although Valencia are looking for sales. I have heard the links with Savona. I think that one is legit. And by all accounts, I was told that he's quite open to a move to the Premier League. He's 22 years of age now. And I wouldn't call him a centre-back, by the way. Much of what I've seen from him is in the right-back position, where I think Newcastle will probably want to strengthen. He's an Italy under-21 international. Maybe he can play centre-back. I can't say I've seen so much of him, but I covered Italy's under-21 tournaments a little bit over the last 2 years as a football commentator, and I saw him deployed quite often at that level as a right-back. He played a lot in last season, from what I was told, in Serie A. He's extremely tall, which is great because you go as a centre-back, you've got height. You go as a right-back, you've got power and pace too. He's got good movement off the ball too. So this one could be one to watch. I know the Newcastle interest is genuine. Again, I'm not aware of anything too advanced at this stage. And obviously, if they are thinking right-back, centre-back, or just right-back, it's with Kieran Trippier and his sort of long-term Newcastle future all in mind, and you can't sort of only rely on Tino Livramento on that right-hand side. So I think if they can find somebody that's a versatile defender that can provide right-back cover, that would be very beneficial. And even though we know that Hall and Livramento are outstanding, and I think they both got a great chance of playing at the next World Cup and getting minutes under Thomas Tuchel, but some right-back cover is probably welcomed, given that there are a few more options over on that left-hand side if Lewis Hall is not the starter.
I think this is a Spurs fan in the chat, but we don't mind. Morgan Gibbs-White, anything on that scenario?
I mean, the Gibbs-White situation is that Spurs still think they can get this deal over the line. They argue they haven't breached any rule or law regarding the release clause. Newcastle have looked, by the way, at Gibbs-White before, but they're not in the race now. And Nottingham Forest are essentially arguing that you only know about this release clause if you come to us. So if you haven't come to us and we haven't told you about the release clause, then you've learnt about it illegally. So they've put Tottenham on a notice and said you can't speak to the player, which is not necessarily binding, but it means they can't complete the triggering of the clause. However, they could make a bid outside of the clause. They could go higher than the clause on different terms. And then Nottingham Forest would have to decide if they want this to all go away and just sell a player that wants to move to Spurs, or if they're going to cave, drop the legal action and just allow the clause to be triggered. And the other extreme is obviously Forest buying time for two reasons. One, because they've not given up on persuading Gibbs-White after all of this to sign a new deal. You may remember Michael Olise had his clause almost triggered by Chelsea 2 years ago. And then Palace alleged that it was done illegally. Chelsea backed off. Olise signed a new contract and stayed another year. So that's what Forest want. But right now, Tottenham haven't given up. Player wants the move to Tottenham. So there is still a realistic chance this one gets done. But whether or not that's via the clause or via a different structure or via legal action, we'll have to let it play out. And I think the last thing to say is, in conjunction to this legal action and threat, it's buying Forest time. And in the time taken, Forest are looking at Morgan Gibbs-White replacements, which tell you they still think there's a chance he could go to Spurs. Bilal Al-Khanous at my club Leicester is one name to watch. He's got a 26 million euros relegation release clause. And Forest are one of at least 3 Premier League clubs that have expressed an interest in the Moroccan internationals. So let's sort of wait and see if this is grandstanding, if there is actually legal action. But Spurs still want to find a way to get that deal over the line.
Ben, I think we've got to 45 minutes. I think you've got to go. I think you've got something else coming up. So thanks, as always, for your insight. Thanks for answering all the questions. You never back out of them. We'll try and get you on again next week. We'll find out what our diaries are like and we'll bring you back then, mate.
Yeah, look forward to it. Keep up the good work and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, mate. Enjoy New York. Take care. So big thanks to Ben. And what we get out of Ben is his opinion. We never get him stating a fact. We never get him saying this is what's going to happen or that's going to happen. What we get is Ben's opinion. And I think that's the most important thing. The negativity in, on my social media line when I was asking for questions was quite, I wouldn't say it was surprising. We always get 1 or 2, but we had quite a few regular viewers who were having, it's probably fair to say, having a bit of a pop at him. So for me, ultimately, I just think he comes on, he gives his opinion, and like everybody, he can be right and he can be wrong. That was the point I was trying to make at the start of the show. But he does bring numbers. He does bring people along from other clubs, Liverpool, Spurs fans and Nottingham Forest fans in the chat tonight. And the fact that we broadcasted on Twitter, of course, brings big numbers. 14,500 people live tonight watching NUFC Matters, which is always very appreciative. And I think if you've stumbled across this for the first time because of Ben, do jump onto YouTube, search NUFC Matters, and please give us a subscription. As for me, what's my opinions on what's going on at the moment? It's been a strange week, hasn't it? It's been a strange week. It really has been. From my perspective, I really did think that Newcastle were being serious about Ekitik. I expected them to go back in at least with one more offer, at least to go in higher than the 70 million euros or whatever it was that they actually offered. But from my view, to see them pull out, it then arouses suspicion. You think, well, have they done this? Is this been a bit of a ploy to take Liverpool away from Alexander Isak? What I would say with Alexander Isak is that, he's got a 3-year contract. It's quite clear that he wasn't going to move this summer. I think if Alexander Isak does leave Newcastle United, I could see him going abroad. I don't think he would go to one of our rivals. And I do see teams like Chelsea and Arsenal and Liverpool and Manchester City as our rivals. So for me personally, I never saw that as an issue. I was never worried about Alexander Isak leaving this summer. Of course, Alexander Isak will leave at some point. And some people have been slated for saying that. Alexander Isak, I can't see him still being here when he's in his 30s. So for me, I think it's the way people say things. It's the way people put things out on social media. Anything can be taken out of context and misconstrued. What I like about our chat in particular, the likes of Mozza and Jules and the other moderators are all quite level-headed and they all try to keep everybody calm in the chat. Makes my job a bit easier as well. But we genuinely try not to lead anyone up the garden path on the air. We can all get excited, we can all have an opinion, and we can all be wrong. But as long as we're respectful to each other in the chat and respectful to visiting fans who come into the chat as well, that's the key. We're all of a certain, vintage. That's what I often say. This channel has been deliberately set up over the years, for the last 5 years, for people who are over 40, who've been there, done it, got the T-shirt, probably worn the Stone Island and stuck it back in their jumper. But you know what? We've got a really nice community here, and that's the way it's going to stay. What do I expect over the next couple of weeks? Do I think we'll go for Whissa? It's another name, isn't it? It's just another name plucked out of the ether. It's another name for the media to have fun with for the next couple of weeks. But like we keep saying on here, we keep preaching it. Nobody knows what's going on at Newcastle United. Nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes. And until we see somebody on the pitch wearing that black and white shirt and holding the scarf and going through everything that Alanga's just been through in the last few days, that's when we know that we've got somebody in the bag. I think the fact that the Trafford deal's gone quiet, it doesn't concern me. The fact that it's gone quiet is great. I love the question by Blue Rhythm Boy tonight in the chat, which I asked to Ben. Why does our business always seem to be publicised? It does get publicised. It does always seem to end up in the papers, and that is literally because we are a clickbaiter's dream. We all literally jump on everything because we want to know every single thing about Newcastle United, and we all literally come onto the internet to check out what's going on day after day after day, sometimes hour after hour after hour. And that's the beauty of our football club. It is big news and big business, and we all want to know exactly what is going on. So that is why we are targeted by so many media outlets, and we keep saying it time and time again. Jack, you're right. At my count, we're 4 striker targets so far. We won't see the next player come, and they'll just be unveiled. And that's right. We had the farcid Mark Gahey when Newcastle clearly weren't going to spend anything in the transfer window. So far, we've had Brian and Mbeumo, we've had João Pedro, now we've had Ekitik, now it's going to be Whissa. Who's next? Hopefully it'll be somebody who comes in that we don't see coming. As you say, Jack, that is the big thing about Newcastle United, and the way that they've done business when they've spent money. Since the new one has come in, it has been enter stage left, this person who no one's heard about. And let's hope that's what we're still doing. Let's hope we're doing that business with Trafford behind the scenes. Let's hope we're doing that kind of business with the centre halves as well. I'm in agreement with some of the people in the chat, people saying that we needed we've let Longstaff go, so do we need another midfielder? And yeah, but we need 2 11s if we are going to compete at the top of the table year after year after year, Champions League year after year after year, cup finals, and hopefully winning cup finals year after year after year. We need to have 2 squads of 11. I wouldn't like to see us go as far as Chelsea and have 50 players in the dressing room, and 20 who can't be involved day after day after day. But it's crazy, isn't it? It's just we are literally doing it the hard way. We are doing it without the finances, and we are doing and we're doing it without being able to spend the finances, is what I should have said. Great show as always, says B. Taylor. Thank you. Huge thanks to Ben as well. Always 2 sides to the story, of course. Ruth says, I get bored of Ben. His analysis is a crushing depression. In that he's like saying everything is stacked against you no matter what. Yeah, and I mean, listen, I know some of the lads on here, they don't particularly respect Ben's opinion, and that's some of the lads who do the shows, but I do like having Ben on the show. He's somebody who I can have a conversation with, I can have a chat with, and he causes debate. He does bring numbers, he does bring numbers to the channel, which is nice. We don't go searching them, but it is nice because it brings different people to the channel, and that's how this community is being built over the course of the last few years. Interesting to see a lot of people mentioning Sesko. That's another one who's been linked with Newcastle. Mateta is another one as well. Also, I saw Gineste Wijnaldum in the chat there saying Boniface, Walter Made, or Sesko. So many different names, so many players have been linked. And that's it. At least he's a journalist, says King Monkey. Some good questions as well. I did manage to squeeze a couple of them in, I think. So, we do try to get everybody up there on the chat if we can. King Monkey says as well, so many random opinions these days. You were right. Almeria Mag says, Whissa too old in my opinion, and he stated he wants Spurs. Yeah, I don't think Brentford will allow Mbeumo and Whissa to go. I think they'll allow one of them to go. And ultimately, from a financial point of view, they'll probably want the money from Mbeumo. But Manchester United seem to be in crisis still. They've got big problems. They haven't qualified for the Champions League. They were just above the relegation positions. They do seem to be struggling to get the deal over the line. And Whissa may go somewhere. And if he does go to Spurs, it's another one that everyone will say we've missed out on it. We've only missed out on it because the magazines and papers and radios and that are all linking us with Whissa. There's no guarantee that that's who we've gone for, but I am still very confident that we will have some players in before the kick-off. Not before 1st of September. I'm still convinced we will have more players in. We've got to have more players in. We can't go into this season without players. Taylor, hope you're well, mate. Ben's very relatable for me. Backs it up with knowledge too. Different strokes for different folks, though, right? Yeah, and I mean, look, he's difficult to get on the channel. He's very busy. He's all over the place, and he's in New York there, but he covers so many different clubs as well, which I always find quite interesting because he can give an insight into Chelsea, into Leicester, into Manchester United. And I just think, he wouldn't be doing all of these things if he wasn't good at what he does. So it is interesting. Muzza says social media means anyone can see anything now. In your days, you waited for the newspaper to tell you who he'd signed. See, I am vintage. Well, you know what? It's an interesting that you should say that because whilst I was siphoning through Tweet of the Week, Muzza, I did find what was in place before social media and Twitter. Here it is, pre-internet chat room using an old version of Windows. Muzza, is that you on there, Muzza? Looking at the window? And Jules there? I'm not sure. I'm going to get pelters for that now. Yes, Liam, I am, mate. I am. I'll be on the early train. Ian says, with respect to Ben, there is no doubt that Sky Sport and TalkSport were desperate for Isak to join the Greedy Six Club. Yeah, 100%. I remember being youngster getting the old paper on holiday to find out who you'd signed, usually 2 days old, says Taylor. And Denise agrees with me. Does think we'll sign more. Yeah, 100% we will. There's no doubt about it. Listen, it's not time to get worried. The time to get worried is September the 1st if all we've signed is Elanga and we've lost a few more players. That's when we're starting to get concerned. And I still think Alexander Isak signing a new contract will be a big thing. I genuinely think us getting, him on the dotted line will be big. The thing I was thinking of this week, Elanga, good friends, of course, with Alexander Isak, good friends with, Willis Sula, knows Livramento, etc. But, I am sure that Elanga will have come to the club because he knew Isak was staying. It's an opportunity to play with Isak, who he plays with at a national level. So, that hasn't even been mentioned, but you must think that he's had some kind of involvement in bringing him in. And remember the Freudian slip that Elanga gave us as well, which was, I've spoken to some of the other lads who are coming in, and it's going to be an exciting season, which is great. Ben seems to give the vibe he admires us as a club, and you'll never get where you want to get as the dice is loaded against you. After watching Ben, he always makes me think, why even try? It's an interesting concept, Ruth, but he was, Newcastle is his second club, and I think that's why he's got a soft spot. It was good to have him on during the takeover because it gave a bit of balance to the channel. We were very pro-Saudi takeover. There was a lot of people against us. We got a lot of stick for being pro takeover, but having Ben on gave us that opposite, give us the opposite view, and that meant that we weren't just, we weren't a Saudi apologists channel, which is the way we were being described. We had somebody on who was prepared to say this shouldn't happen, blah 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 blah, and that's how Ben came to the channel. And I genuinely think Ben has been a valuable part of NUFC Matters as it's grown over the years. So it is good to have him on. We've had other journalists on in the past, but I don't think anybody has been as professional as Ben when he's come on, and very professional, despite the fact he gets a lot of stick and a lot of criticism. It's tough, but we do need patience and to trust Eddie's judgment. Look at Elanga. People were lukewarm towards him, but haven't heard him speak, and his enthusiasm, most agree now he's perfect. Dave, I agree. Dave Havery, good to see you in the chat, mate. I hope you're well. Hopefully see you over the course of the next season. Elanga speaks well on Sky. He said he can't wait to play with Isak and NUFC as well as Sweden. Exactly, Darren. Exactly. Isak signing a new contract will take a decent part of our money to spend, so we have to factor that in. That's another good point. And Isak signing a new contract doesn't stop him leaving, just means we get paid. But of course, if he's got a 3-year contract, he could go now. And I genuinely think if and when he does leave, you can't put a time scale on that. You know, you could say in 2-3 years, but you know, when he does go at some point, then Newcastle will be handsomely paid for him. There's no doubt about that. And I still think if he does go, he will move abroad. He won't go. But I think he wants to play in the Premier League and the Champions League with Newcastle United. And worries about Isak, I don't think we need to do that. This line about us going in for Ekitik to stop Liverpool looking at Isak's rubbish. That's my opinion. I think that's absolute garbage. I think Newcastle did genuinely go in for Ekitik again. Liverpool have decided, well, you know, they're not selling Isak, and that's that. You know, so we need to look for somebody else. Let's go and flex our muscles and get him in, and that's it. And Ekitik's strike record's okay. It's not as good as Isak's. Let's face it, not many are. And Ekitik, I still think, would come and play second fiddle to Alexander Isak. He wouldn't be coming in to usurp him or rival him or even play with him, because I still think Eddie will go with the same system. Isak signing new contracts, what he deserves, keeps him happy and protects his value. We were worrying about Bruno leaving. He didn't. It's a good point, Gary. It's pointless losing sleep over something that, you know, might never happen. It's not Isak being linked with Liverpool that frustrates the fans. It's the lack of getting the message across that he's strictly not for sale. It doesn't get reported nowhere near enough. I get that. Yeah, I get that. The pre-season game is upon us. Let's go, yeah. And I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow with the amigos. We are on tomorrow night, 5 o'clock until 7. Just to say, I had a wonderful time with Oasis last night. I did, as everyone knows, managed to get a ticket. Overpaid for it, as many did, but it was worth going. Fantastic gig, and well worth going along and seeing the lads again. Different crack to was when I saw them. The original Oasis, of course, this wasn't the original Oasis. This is the two brothers in a different band. But overall, I enjoyed the experience. And it was lovely to see 2 generations of supporters now together at Heaton Park, enjoying the music we all, you know, well, a lot of us love. So, you know, for me personally, really pleased I went, and happy days. Okay, I'm going to play out the ads. I got a lot to do tonight, catching up on a little bit of work from being away yesterday. But we are back at 5 o'clock tomorrow. There'll be a pre-recorded show on Saturday, as I will be at Celtic, and then on Sunday. It is the professionals at its usual time at 5 o'clock. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Please, if you're watching on Twitter, please jump over onto YouTube, search NUFC Matters, and hit the subscribe button. We do 7 shows a week, and there's 15,000 of you still watching on Twitter. So thanks for that. Much appreciated. Take care. See you all tomorrow night. Good night. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at their website, skipsandbins.com. Contact them at www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to our fanzine sponsor, United Group Travel. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. 2 crew driver and courier, local family company, 3-star plus quality hotels and no interchanges. Hot and cold snacks and drinks available on the coach, all excursions included. Their website, unitedgrouptravel.com. Email beverly.ugtl@gmail.com. Telephone 01670 632 460 or 0791 666 4174. Just £30 per person deposit. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. And if you like listening to us as a podcast, you can go to Sports Social Podcast Network or to iTunes, Spotify, or other podcast providers. If you want to support the show, then hit the subscribe button. It's free. We do 7 shows a week. Hit the little thumb up under the video, which is the like button, or click share to share to your social media. You can also join the channel on YouTube by hitting the join button for as little as $1.99 a month. If you want to become an NUFC Matters member, you can go to nufcmatters.co.uk. It's a £25 one-off fee. You get your pen, you get your badge, key ring, you get your beer mat and your fridge magnet and your membership card, nufcmatterspodcast.co.uk for that. And we have an event early next year, 13th of February 2026, an evening with Beardsley, Waddle and Gascoigne takes place at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House. To buy your tickets for that event, go to the box office 0191 243 1171 or Tyne Theatre and Opera House.uk. Don't forget, we've also got limited tickets for the League Cup final replay, Friday the 25th of July at the Tyneside Irish Centre. It's 7 o'clock kickoff and tickets from nufcmatterspodcast.co.uk. It is free entry. There are only 100 tickets and we have 38 tickets left. Everyone who enters into the ballot for tickets gets a chance of winning one of these wonderful replica Carabao Cup final medal montages. So all you need to do is go to nufcmatterspodcast.co.uk. And don't forget, the fanzine is back next season, 4 issues for £25. That includes your postage. All proceeds go to Age UK, North Tyneside Dementia. And we've also got a few things available in our shop, nufcmatterspodcast.co.uk.